Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
Good morning and welcome to the Business Hour. I'm Ron Comacho, your host, and today's business at hand is the business of sustainable communities. Communities which are trying to incorporate into their policies and practices the kind of things that help them become more responsible in their resource usage and in building healthy communities, building healthy environments. Sustainability has been an increasingly important aspect of community development, and perhaps no other organization arguably has done more in this regard, certainly in the Southeast, than the Metro Atlanta region's Southface Institute. And so I'm really pleased to have as my guest today Stephanie Stuckey, who has personally done a great deal to promote community sustainability during her professional career and in her role as the Director of Sustainability at Southface. Welcome to the Business Hour, Stephanie.
Thank you, Ron. It's a pleasure.
Well, Stephanie, let's start out with the very word. I know that a lot of people who have been involved in environmental related matters, either professionally or as volunteers, or simply have kept themselves informed, understand the notion of sustainability. But why not tell us a little bit about how you would describe sustainability as it relates to community development, so listeners that aren't familiar with it can understand what all fits under that umbrella of sustainability.
I'd be happy to. Sustainability at its core is conserving resources at the present time for future generations. It's that simple. It's making sure that we wisely use what we have today so that those who follow us are going to be able to reap those benefits as well. There's three core legs of a stool for sustainability that people generally refer to, and that's economics, environment, and social. Yeah, I was trying to think of a third E, and equity comes fairly close. It's the idea that you were thinking about the people aspect of sustainability. I think so often the perception is that sustainability is solely focused on environmental initiatives, and that's not the case. It has to cost out. There has to be a financial case made for sustainability to be truly sustainable, in my opinion, and especially with your show being focused on business, you can't have a sustainable business environmentally if financially you can't support those initiatives, and then certainly being mindful of your customer base and also your staff. So the people component is extremely important as well.
Well, we find that there are more and more communities that are becoming aware of the cost, plural, of energy, but also of other resources like water. And on our program, we have had a couple of key figures in the American water resources community on the program. And that obviously is really important in states like California and in Texas, where there are droughts and where because agriculture is such an important part of it, they have to be mindful of the use of water. Energy is something that affects every single state and every single nation, every single community. And the Southface Institute has been a leader in this regard. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, maybe the original focus might have been strictly residential and commercial, and I'm not sure which one was started first, which was the chicken and which was the egg. But there was a focus on helping the building community build more energy efficient buildings. And as I've sort of explained it to some people, sustainability was an outgrowth of environment in much the same way that environment was an outgrowth of ecology. It was a larger hierarchy of factors that went into the discipline that focused on resources, focused on aspects of wildlife, and in the case of urban design, on people, and so it just became a broader and broader based notion that you can have a healthier environment if you make your community more sustainable. And you bear the title of Sustainability Director with Southface. So would you share what you can about something I just alluded to, and how Southface has evolved in the last 40 plus years, and when it was that they decided that they would formalize their commitment to quote unquote sustainability by having someone like you? Because if I'm not mistaken, you are their first director of sustainability. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you were also, and we'll get to this in a moment, the chief resiliency, the inaugural chief resiliency
officer.
Yes, resilience officer for the city of Atlanta. But let's go back to Southface. How do you view their evolution over the last 40 years up until the point where they brought you in to help them formalize their commitment to sustainability?
Well, I like how you framed the question in the overall context of what has happened in the environmental movement writ large in the United States. And you're right, it started as an ecological movement. And I think a lot of people in modern times, so I'm not going back to the days of Teddy Roosevelt and protecting national parks, and that certainly is a key part of the environmental movement in the U.S., but sort of the more modern era, it dates back to Rachel Carson and when Silent Spring came out. And I'm not sure the exact date, I'm thinking early 1960s. And so that's when there became an awareness of not just the environment, but I thought, when I said the people component of sustainability is so critical, Rachel Carson's book, which talked about the impact of chemicals in our environment, and DDT in particular, and the title refers to the fact that birds were not able to survive with DDT getting into their eggs, so they were no longer singing, so there was a silent spring, and the impact that DDT was having on human health. And so there was becoming this intense awareness not only of our environment, but the human aspect and the impact it had on our health and our well-being. So that grew into a larger environmental movement that really piggybacked onto the civil rights movement. And the first Earth Day, which was founded by Gaylord Nelson, he was a U.S. Senator from Wisconsin, and he started it as a sit-in for teachers to focus on the environment. And so that's really sort of what began the more modern environmental movement. And then that outcry of public activism around environmental initiatives led to major federal changes in regulations related to protecting our environment. So you saw in the early 1970s the EPA being created, and the Clean Water Act and the Clean Air Act. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is all of that was under the Nixon administration. So I try very hard when I talk to audiences to underscore that the environment should not be political. I know it has become politicized, and climate change has become politicized, but so many of our leaders in the environmental movement were Republicans. And Teddy Roosevelt and Richard Nixon are two in particular that were critical. So Southface was part of that era. So in the early 1970s, Dennis Creech, who was the founder of Southface, and some of his colleagues, they started putting solar on rooftops. And that's where the name Southface comes from, because you want to have a south-facing roof to take advantage of solar. So they were putting solar on commercial and residential properties and focusing on the built environment. And when you figure that the built environment accounts for about 40% of our energy consumption, that's a pretty important area to focus on. So they were looking at how we can make homes more energy efficient and water efficient. You talked about we being, Atlanta and Georgia being in a drought-prone area, so focused on water efficiency, renewable energy, and how to save money. And so that built environment piece was very much at the core of Southface, and they focused on residential and commercial alike. I don't think there was like one over the other. And Southface has evolved into doing more policy-related work and doing more cities and communities-related work. So we have a policy director now. She's been on board for several years, and then my coming on board at Southface was a natural extension of doing more work in communities and partnering with local governments.
You know, I wasn't aware of Rachel Carson before I attended school in Claremont, which is where she wrote Silent Spring.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and certainly that would have promoted a little bit of an atmosphere of environmental awareness that influenced me. And because we chatted before the program about my roots related to an interest in environmental matters, and so it probably accelerated, intensified certainly my interest in environmental matters, because she left her mark in that community.
There was a whole generation impacted by that book.
Yeah, and so I have sustained, if you will, my interest in environmental matters, and I know that you have as well. And again, we'll get back to the evolution of Stephanie Stuckey in environmental matters and sustainability. But let's take a moment. Southface has, even though it was a more simplified mission, getting solar panels onto residential and commercial structures, but energy, policy, advocacy, and overall technology support to the building industry. Tell us about some of the programs at Southface that range from advanced commercial building initiatives to the Atlanta Better Building Challenge, the BIT Challenge, the Care and Conserve Plumbing Repair Program, the Green Infrastructure and Resilience Institute, the Green Building Programs, Earthcraft, and nonprofit grant programs that are provided. Maybe you could just touch on the highlights of some of those programs.
Well, I think what weaves all of these programs together is the fact that Southface has a very technical team of experts that can do boots on the ground, actual implementation of energy-related projects. And that's what sets us apart from so many other environmental nonprofits, many of which focus on community organizing and policy development, all of which are very important. But you can't achieve impact unless you're actually able to do the boots on the ground work that Southface does. So most of our staff are engineers and technical experts. We have architects, landscape architects, people who really know how to get stuff done, right? And that's what these programs are about.
We're going to take a break before we start to drill down, but I'm going to point out that if you want to learn more to our listeners, go to www.southface.org and take a look at the facility itself at Southface Institute. It's a very environmentally sound structure. We're here with Stephanie Stuckey, the Director of Sustainability Services for Southface. We'll be back to talk about sustainability and related matters right after this break.
You can keep your doctor, you can keep your plan, and every family will save thousands of dollars a year. I'm Ellen Deal, and if you've been hurt by the Affordable Care Act, you can email MAGA45CAG@gmail.com to see if we can help. Small business owners, individuals, families, and baby boomers, email MAGA45CAG@gmail.com for 3 easy questions to determine if you can get away from Obamacare. I'm a 20-year veteran of the insurance industry and here to help you for all your insurance needs.
Perhaps you are struggling to cope with the disease of addiction. If not, you probably know a family member or friend that needs help in battling the cravings and the personal and professional damage done by the effects of drugs or alcohol. Get a pen and paper and be ready to write down the following. These are the issues that the trained staff at the Atlanta Healing Center address and treat every day. Their doctors and counselors with over 40 years of practice in the field of addiction can treat the suffering individual in a thoughtful, compassionate, and experienced manner and guide him or her along the path to recovery. So call 770-696-9862 and speak to a knowledgeable staff member about how you or your loved one can be helped to enjoy a better and healthier life. More information is also available on the website at www.atlantahealingcenter.com.
Last week, my party chief said he wanted to go someplace he had never been before. So, I took him to the rear property line. Sound familiar? Are you tired of trudging all the way to the back of property lines? Why not take the steps to become a crew chief instead? Or even better, why not become a professional land surveyor and see your name stamped on that final survey? The Nettleman Institute of Land Surveying Engineering Technology is your next step. At NICET, we believe you are the future of surveying, and we want to do everything we can to help you succeed at becoming a professional surveyor. NICET offers the only online one-year certificate of land surveying program that includes all books, fees, and expenses in one simple price. Visit landsurveycareer.com to stop trucking through the mud and step into your future today.
You're listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
Welcome back to the Business Hour. We're here with Stephanie Stuckey, Director of Sustainability Services for Southface Institute, and we've been talking about the focus, the mission of Southface as a organization that is hands-on, boots on the ground, as Stephanie puts it, to help the building industry in particular with the design and the fabrication of residential structures and commercial structures for purposes of being more environmentally friendly, more energy efficient, and more sustainable. If you're more sustainable, you're going to be a financially better built structure, and hence the aspect of finance that's a part of the sustainability model, as well as the social element and the environmental health element that all go together. Before the break, we were talking about some of the specific programs and partnerships that sustainability has, that Southface has forged. Tell us a little bit about the Advanced Commercial Buildings Initiative, because Southface truly deserves to be regarded as an organization that would foster advanced commercial building initiatives. Yep. There may be other organizations across the country that have focused in this area, but certainly none that I think have done a better job than Southface.
Yeah, and I did want to just underscore one point you made a second ago on the people aspect of these buildings that are more energy and water efficient, is that they are healthier buildings. The air quality is better if you have buildings that have less VOCs in the paint, if you have well-sealed buildings but that also are allowed to breathe and to flow, that you have natural light coming in, that affects your mood. So human comfort and health with sustainable buildings is really an important aspect that often gets overlooked with all the other benefits that people generally talk about. So some of the programs that Southface offers, the Atlanta Commercial Buildings Initiative, that's also aligned with the work that Southface has done with the City of Atlanta. So when I was head of sustainability and head of resilience for City of Atlanta, my number one partner externally was Southface Institute. And they worked with us on commercial building stock. The bulk of energy consumption in the built environment obviously is going to be in the large buildings, so large commercial buildings, and we're talking about 50,000 square feet and above. So what Southface can do is help with doing energy audits. So we do what's known as some of the professional level ASHRAE level 1 or ASHRAE level 2. So these are professional audits, and we will come in and we will make recommendations as to what upgrades should be made to make your building energy efficient and help do the return on investment so you can make wise financial decisions about what makes the most sense.
Tell the listeners who ASHRAE is.
It's a heating and electrical
It's kind
society,
of the
and
technical oversight
I've got
for
that.
the HVAC
Yeah,
community.
yeah, and I'm sorry, I'm gonna mess up the acronym,
Yeah,
but
I was
it
trying
is
to
the
remember
Heating
myself.
and Electric Professional Association, and it is the accepted industry standard for doing audits.
It's like the good housekeeping
Yeah.
for the heating and ventilation, air conditioning community.
And there's different levels, so you can do a lower grade that obviously will just focus on the higher returns and the basic, more simple things that you can do, but you can do a more intense. So, like for your home, you're not going to necessarily need something super sophisticated. But we also do residential audits, and then so we'll make recommendations, and we have vendors with whom we work. We're very careful not to be in the business of promoting one vendor over the other, but we can say, here are vendors that we know are going to do good quality work, and you make a decision based on what is the best fit for you.
And I don't want to turn this into an infomercial, but I would encourage anyone out there who is the owner of a business or has oversight for commercial or residential structures, so private residence, but also if you know someone, if you have a spouse, or if you own a business and you own the building, definitely check into Southface if you've ever thought about making your structure more energy efficient or just more efficient in terms of its environmentally healthy is where I'm aiming.
And not just the equipment upgrades, but also operations. So the BIT building program, that focuses on building operations. So we'll come in and make recommendations about how existing building stock can improve its operations, so you're going to see less energy and water consumption. I think the Care and Conserve Plumbing Repair Program is one that might be of some interest to people, because we go into low-income communities. We're doing that program right now with the Department of Watershed Protection for City of Atlanta. So it's a contract we have with them, and we will go into low-income homes and we'll do basic repairs, mostly plumbing leaks, but you can also do some upgrades to help their housing be more water efficient, and so they're going to save money on their water bills. So that's a program we're really proud of. Green Infrastructure and Resilience Institute is one that's grant funded right now, and we have a workforce education component to that, which I'm very proud of. So Southface also does workforce training and certification training. A lot of professionals will go through our programming to understand how to do some of these audits, or how to upgrade HVAC. So we offer training. So the green infrastructure is ways that you can manage stormwater overflow or combined sewer system overflow in an environmentally sensitive way using natural components. So you could have a bioswale that's going to absorb water, or you can have permeable pavers that will allow water to naturally infiltrate without having to build what they call heavy gray infrastructure, more piping. So we do that in a variety of settings. So we've got the green infrastructure work, and then the Atlanta Better Buildings Challenge is a voluntary program that was funded by the Department of Energy, and City of Atlanta is the #1 city for square footage committed to the program. So you make a commitment to reduce energy consumption and water consumption 20% by 2020. That program is winding down. We've been doing that program in Atlanta for over 8 years. It's been incredibly successful.
Were you in the position of Chief Resilience
Yeah.
Officer at the time that the city initiated its...
Not when it was initiated. That was my predecessor, Denise Quarles, who was Director of Sustainability before me, but I was proud to carry on that program, and we work closely with the community improvement districts, so Central Atlanta Progress and the Buckhead and Midtown community business districts, and getting commercial building stock enrolled in the program and committed to reducing their energy and water consumption. What's great about that program is it's voluntary. So nobody's forcing you to do it, and it's a competition. So we're competing with other cities to see which cities can have the most building stock.
Tell us about Southface's involvement with the Earthcraft program, which has been around for a while.
This is a program that Southface developed with the Atlanta Home Builders Association, and I'm sure most listeners are familiar with LEED certification. And that's a green building certification. It's fairly complex and it costs money. You have to pay a fee to be LEED certified. And it's a national program, LEED is, run by the U.S. Green Building Council. So Southface and the Atlanta Home Builders Association saw a need for a more regional certification that would take into account some of the specifics of a southern climate. We are more drought prone. We have humidity in the air, which impacts our heating and our ventilation systems. And we have different types of materials that we source locally, different types of timber that we source for our building stock. So we wanted a certification that would be more southern-based, regional-based. And so that's what Earthcraft is. It's been extremely successful, and so we offer that certification. You can do an Earthcraft certification in addition to LEED or instead of LEED. So it's another option.
Yeah, you mentioned LEED, the Leadership in Energy and Efficiency Design certification program. If you want a LEED certification, Southface can help you in that regard. That's as well. And they even offer programs or seminars on LEED certification?
Yeah. Yeah, we offer trainings in that, and we can do certification. We can also refer you. So we offer both certifications, but Earthcraft is the one that we developed, and obviously that's one that we're going to promote.
Sure.
Yeah.
The nonprofit grant program, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it started out as Grants to Green. It was a partnership with the Community Foundation of Greater Atlanta and funded by the Candida Fund. And it's now transitioned to being housed solely at Southface, and we've rebranded it as the Good Use Program. We work with nonprofits and faith-based institutions, and we help them do an audit for energy efficiency and water efficiency, and then we'll help them with the upgrades and the retrofits that they need. So we do ask for a match in funding, but a lot of the work that's done is grant funded, so the costs are reduced. If there's a nonprofit or a faith-based institution listening, just get in touch with Southface. You can go on our website and you can contact us, and we'll give you more information. We can send you sort of a summary of what the expectations are, but our website also talks in detail about that program.
So you can have faith-based structures like schools and churches that are more energy efficient, more sustainable. We're here with Stephanie Stuckey. We've been talking about the Southface Institute's focus on sustainability. We'll be back to talk with Stephanie more about that and her personal career right after this break.
Quick Stakes, that's QUIK Stakes, are not just for surveyors. They are great for family and community gardens. Go online to www.quickstake.com or contact your local land surveying supply dealer and get you a box of Quick Stakes. You'll love them every year when you plant your garden. Again, that's Quick Stakes, QUIK Stakes, the truly preferred way to stake and identify what's in your garden now.
Your auto love and investment demands the best, and for 45 years, Passport Transport has been meeting those demands. From manufacturers to the one-car collectors and all other facets of the auto industry and antique auto hobby. The first and the finest with unequaled service and peace of mind. Passport Transport, your auto transportation company. Contact PassportTransport.com with your need today. Passport Transport.
Want to ace your upcoming survey exam? The NLC Prep Combo has everything you need to help you crush your upcoming FS, PS, Florida PSM, California PLS, or Texas RPLS exam. Combos include a full-length practice exam book with the same number of questions and category types as the actual exam, a pre-programmed HP35 with 17 programs to solve those time-consuming equations such as COGO, triangles, traverses, and more in seconds. A complete online course is included that covers every topic of the exam with videos, workbooks, quizzes, and a full-length practice exam that simulates the computer-based format of the FS and PS exam. That gives you not just one, but 2 full-length practice exams to help fully prepare you for test day. Visit us at nlcprep.com for more information and let us help you crush your exams.
You're listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
Department of Energy.
Welcome back to the Business Hour. I'm Ron Comacho, your host, and we've been talking to Stephanie Stuckey. She's the Director for Sustainability Services for Southface Institute, and Southface Institute has spent more than 40 years focusing on matters related to energy efficiency in the built environment, residential structures and commercial structures, and as Stephanie pointed out, even faith-based organizations that have churches and or faith-based schools that want to be more sustainable can work with Southface to become more sustainable. Stephanie, how does Southface work in the area of public policy advocacy on the state and the local level?
A lot of our advocacy at the state level is going to be at the Public Service Commission, and that's the statewide entity that regulates our energy, and specifically they regulate Georgia Power. And so that is the utility under the Georgia Territorial Act that provides energy for all the major metropolitan areas. Every 3 years, Georgia Power has to submit to the Georgia Public Service Commission for approval what's known as the Integrated Resource Plan. They call it the IRP. And that is how Georgia will be, or Georgia Power will source its energy for the next 20 years. So they update this plan every 3 years. So their energy mix could be, it's what we have in Georgia right now. It's a mix of coal and nuclear and renewable energy, so solar. We've got some hydro, and we've got natural gas. And so what does that mix look like? That obviously changes based on consumption needs and on what's being supplied. We're seeing more nuclear because we're adding 2 units at Plant Vogel right now, units 3 and 4. And Southface advocates before the Public Service Commission and these IRP proceedings, and then also related to that is a rate case where, depending on what the energy usage is going to be, sometimes Georgia Power will come back and say we want an adjustment in rates. So that the rate case is actually going on right now. So we go before these proceedings. You can intervene, and you can request. It's almost like I'm a lawyer by training, so it's akin to a proceeding in a court, where you would have people file proceedings and they want to come in and they want to testify and they want to argue for and present evidence that the final product should be different. So Southface will advocate for energy efficiency and renewable energy, and also being mindful of energy burden on low-income residents. And so as a result of our advocacy and advocacy of other partners in the environmental community, we have been successful, and also in the business community. Georgia Solar Energy Association is a key partner in the work we do. We've been able to get more megawatts of renewable energy in Georgia Power's portfolio, most recently in the IRP proceeding that just concluded. So Georgia Power continues to expand their renewable energy, and they continue to expand energy efficiency programs. And so I think it's a result of a lot of factors, but I'd like to think that Southface has been a key partner at the table and working with utility and working with our elected officials to achieve that. We will sometimes go before the state legislature, less so in that space. We're very strategic and look really at what impacts our work. So if there's something related to energy efficiency or solar in the Georgia legislature, and we feel like our voice needs to be at the table and that need isn't being met by other partners, we might go before the Georgia legislature. And then local government is definitely a sweet spot for us.
You definitely have cultivated some very strategic partnerships. In fact, you had mentioned, speaking of the Public Utilities Commission, that there is a project that you were just working on yesterday.
The Clean Energy Roadshow.
Yeah, down in Macon. Tell us about that.
So Commissioner Tim Echols, who's on the Georgia Public Service Commission, is also an advocate for electric vehicles and alternative fuel vehicles. He personally drives several EVs. And he, for the past 10 years, has promoted a series of events called the Clean Energy Roadshow, where he goes all across Georgia. And this year, we've had 2 of the roadshow stops in Atlanta. We've also been in Albany, Savannah, Augusta, and the last stop was Macon yesterday. And so I have somewhat of a different hat in participating in the roadshow. Part of the portfolio of projects that I do at Southface is running Clean Cities Georgia. That is a program that's funded by the Department of Energy. It was founded in 1972, so the program's been around for a while. And we promote alternative fuels. And the logic behind that is we want to reduce reliance on foreign fuel consumption, and we want to have domestic fuels. And we also want to improve our air quality, improve human health, and promote local economy. So the fuel types that we promote are LNG and CNG, so those are natural gases. We also liquefied or compressed natural gas and renewable natural gas, which is often derived from landfills. Ethanol, which is derived from corn, and the various derivatives of ethanol, like E85 is one of the ethanol products that we'll promote, and propane, and of course electric vehicles, which is something a lot of people are interested in. And so we work with fleets, we work with local governments, we work with large companies in helping them transition to alternative fuels in a way that's going to make economic sense for them. And then we also work on the infrastructure. You have to have fueling stations and charging stations to meet the needs of these fleets. So Clean Cities Georgia, I serve as their coordinator, and on our board we have UPS, we have Cox Automotive, we have DeKalb County Fleet Director, we have City of Atlanta's on the board. So we have the head of the Propane Association of Georgia, we have Atlanta Gas Light and Georgia Power represented on the board. So we're we like to say we're fuel agnostic. It's the right fuel to meet the right need of whatever fleet we're working with or individual we're working with. But the whole idea is to transition to cleaner burning fuels and to reduce our reliance on foreign fuels.
You mentioned the project, the roadshow in Macon. Do you spend a lot of time? I see much of what you're doing is public information related, educating the public about all these different aspects of energy efficiency and sustainability. Tell us about the range of communications. And by the way, this very program, which is helping to spread the word by virtue of having you tell us about your work with Southface. And today, you get the Trooper Award. Stephanie utilized alternative transportation. She rode on the Armada rail system and braved cool temperatures, some of the coolest temperatures of the year, to meet with me. So I think you are walking the walk and not just talking the talk.
Exactly. You've got to. So you really have to understand what you're promoting. I drive an electric vehicle. I have solar panels on my house. I did energy efficiency upgrades last year. So I really do try to promote what I'm talking about so it comes from an authentic voice, but also so I understand what the challenges are. I have had adventures in EV charging, as I like to say, where just this past week I was stuck in Garfield, Georgia, and I had like 10 miles on my car and I had to go charge in a carport. So I've been there, done that. And that's an important part of being informed on what it actually takes to make some of these initiatives a reality.
I'm going to make an allusion to something that is going to remain a mystery for a few minutes, but Stephanie will have some influence over one retail group that I can imagine might have charging stations in its future. But we won't talk about that just yet. We're going to go back to the earliest stages of when you became involved in the area of healthy environment and maybe prior to sustainability, but what would you consider to be those earliest embryological stages, if you might, when you became interested in the built environment, in environmental health, and in sustainability? And you have a great story that you can tell about making a visit to a beautiful island off the coast of Georgia with your dad, but it could be that your roots go back even further. So within that context, Stephanie, tell us about how you evolved and when it was, and it might have been as an early child that you sort of developed an environmental consciousness. Let's talk about that.
Well, I'd encourage our listeners to think about this for themselves as well. When I give speeches about environmentalism or sustainability, I ask people to reflect upon what is their earliest memory related to the environment. And it's almost always people will reflect upon, as a child, going for a walk in nature or being quiet in a public park and being that being a source of serenity. And so I think that's just true of everyone, that the natural environment is just a source for inspiration and peace and clarity and serenity. And that's pretty much where everyone who cares about these issues derives that strength. And we all have it within us. I think everyone, you can say, you're an environmentalist. My family has a timber company, a small timber company, family owned, third generation. I was meeting with the head forester, our president, yesterday. We were having lunch, and he was talking about how, hunters are environmentalists. He spends so much time out in the woods. And my son, who's 17, I would never be able to get him up at 5 a.m. and go out in the woods if it were not that he was hunting deer. So it's just whatever can connect us to nature, I think, is just grounding. And so that was my beginning as well. I spent a lot of time with my father, Billy Stuckey, who was a 5-term U.S. congressman in the 1960s and 70s. And he was around when the EPA was created. He served under Nixon. We're from Middle and South Georgia, and his district included the Georgia Golden Isles, the Georgia coast, and he made Cumberland Island a protected national seashore. He also made the Okefenokee Swamp a protected national wildlife refuge. And when he looks back on what he did in Congress, and he did a lot that was not related to environmental issues, he will say those two initiatives is what he is most proud of. And it's really interesting because he never ran on an environmental platform. That was not what he was about. He's a businessman. He runs the family business, the Stuckey stores. He ran that for many, many years until recently. And so he does not consider himself an environmentalist. And so that's what I want to stress, is that you don't have to wear that title or proclaim it or preach it to do it and live it. And that's what's really impactful, is you just interweave it into what you do, and you recognize it can make sense for what you're doing.
There are an increasing number of people. I'll use one example that's maybe near and dear to our GM here at America's Web Radio, but farmers who understand the value of protecting the environment so they can sustain their farms. And it might be taking a walk through a cornfield where they just thought, man, this is beautiful.
Yeah, my family, we're tree farmers. We grow loblolly pine. And one of the things I've been talking about a lot and would love for this to take on, but all these corporations are making commitments to sustainability. They want to be 100% clean energy. So they buy renewable energy credits that are solar. Well, why aren't they buying carbon sequestration registry credits from timber farmers? Because timber farmers are harvesting carbon. We're doing a great deal of work to improve air quality. So I just think we need to look at all the above and not just consider the usual suspects when it comes to the environment.
We're going to take a break on that note. That was a very good point. We're here with Stephanie Stuckey. We've been talking about matters related to sustainability. We'll be back with Stephanie right after this break.
Quick Stakes, That's Q-U-I-K steaks are not just for surveyors. They are great for family and community gardens. Go online to www.quicksteak.com or contact your local land surveying supply dealer and get you a box of Quick Steaks. You'll love them every year when you plant your garden. Again, that's Quick Steaks, Q-U-I-K steaks, the truly preferred way to stake and identify what's in your garden now.
This is Dr. Susan Blank, Medical Director for the Atlanta Healing Center. Our team is able to offer a multitude of treatment options such as quantitative EEG, also known as brain mapping, hormonal and nutritional assessments, neuropsychological testing, and cognitive therapy, along with traditional 12-step facilitation. And we can even offer you, if appropriate, a gentle medically managed detox. Please contact us at 770-696-9862.
This is Ron Comacho, host of the Business Hour, on Fridays from 10 to 11 a.m. Join me as I talk with passionate professionals on a program that profiles the best businesses, business practices, and fascinating business professionals to get an insider view of how America works.
You're listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
Welcome back to the Business Hour. I'm Ron Comacho, your host, and we're here with Stephanie Stuckey, who is currently the Director for Sustainability Services with Southface Institute, and we've been talking about the range of commitments to energy efficiency and sustainability that has been a part of the Southface mission for over 40 years. But before the break, we were talking a little bit about Stephanie's personal commitment to environment and sustainability. And you told a great story about how your father helped create the National Seashore designation for Cumberland Island, which is a national parks designation. Mm-hmm. And I think that is a fantastic legacy to
it is.
To
Very
have.
Proud of that.
If you've ever been to Cumberland Island, you'll know that it's a nicely preserved island with wild horses and other wildlife. And if you haven't been, you should go. You were also the Chief Resilience Officer for the City of Atlanta, and before we talk about that role, and how it is that we came as a city to beat out San Francisco, Seattle, and Portland, often recognized as extremely environmentally oriented cities. But before we talk about how you helped us beat out San Francisco, Seattle, and Portland as a recognized leader in sustainability space, tell us, first define resilience, which we alluded to earlier is kind of part of the evolution of ecology, environment, sustainability. Resilience could be included as part of that evolution. Tell us about how you personally define resilience, then tell us about your role as the Chief Resilience Officer for the City of Atlanta.
Yeah, it's definitely, like you said, an evolution, and it's along the spectrum. I like to first talk about sustainability and then how resilience differs from that. So I defined sustainability earlier, but to give a little more detail to it, sustainability is, as the word connotes, sustaining. So if a community experiences some type of sudden shock, like there's a hurricane or tornado, then you're going to have a dip where services may be stopped, operations may be stopped, there may be some destruction in the physical and the natural environment, and so you've got to get back to the level of operations and repairing the physical and the natural damage to the level that you were before. You get right back to where you were. You get to the status quo. So that's sustainability. It's sustaining at the level that you already are. Resilience is, in essence, bouncing back. It's going beyond getting to the status quo to where you were before, and it's recognizing that that shock impacted operations and had such a devastating impact on the natural and built environment for a reason. So analyzing what are the underlying stresses and vulnerabilities in a community that made that shock have the impact that it did, and how can we learn from that, build up so we are actually improving. So I have this great graph I show, and I hope I can do it justice talking about it, where sustainability, you have a dip and then you get right back to where you were before. Resilience, you have a dip and then you expand. It's an upward trajectory. You're learning from that mistake and you are becoming more powerful, stronger, better able to adapt and address future shocks, because we're always going to have shocks. You can't prevent the fact that there may be a drought or a heat wave or a tornado, and it's not just weather-related impacts that we're talking about. It could be a cyber attack. It could be a terrorist attack. It could be civil unrest. It could be an election that didn't go the way people may think, and so suddenly you have a change in leadership that causes disruption in how society functions. It's a myriad of things that can cause these shocks. So cities that are more resilient, communities that are more resilient, are going to be able to bounce back better. So that's huge. How do you go about that? So I went from focusing on environmental initiatives as director of sustainability to this resilience work, which is so much broader. You're looking at what are the vulnerabilities that really impact society that make it hard for us to bounce back. And a lot of that's going to be the social elements and the infrastructure of society. So we were looking at income inequality and access to jobs and economic opportunity, affordable housing, poor infrastructure, our aging roads and bridges and housing stock. So all of those factors, but I think what's also really important to focus on is how the two merge, how the human component merges with the physical component, and thinking very thoughtfully about how do you design cities, how do you design communities in a way that fosters social cohesion. Because if you have some sort of disaster, if you have a shock, the communities that do the best are the ones where the people are connected. And so what can you do to foster that? And I'll give an example. There was a heat wave in Chicago, and it was devastating. People died, thousands of people died. There were two neighborhoods adjacent to one another. Socioeconomically, they were pretty much identical. One fared so much better in the heat wave than the other. And so social psychologists went and analyzed the two communities and tried to figure out why did one fare better than the other, because on the surface they are almost identical. What they found is the community that fared better had more sidewalks, had more public parks, had more local businesses like grocery stores. And that meant there were opportunities for the communities to get to know one another and build social cohesion. So when the heat wave struck, neighbors knew one another and knew to look out for one another and took care of each other. So that's what resilience at its core is all about.
Yeah, it's that interrelationship between those factors that you talked about related to sustainability and preparing for that long-term sustainability while looking at those stressors and being able to thwart those stressors, be prepared for those stressors. You have a background in law.
Yes.
Tell me about how your background may have played into your current role or your other post-attorney roles.
Yeah.
And I would imagine public policy is certainly one of those areas, but tell us about some of the others.
Yeah, I love being a lawyer. I went to the University of Georgia Law School like my father did, and whether you actually practice law or not, I think having a degree like law or business, journalism, there's a lot of degrees where you learn skill sets that are transferable, and And we were talking earlier about how you've got a background in psychology. I mean, so many of these skills that you learn in school can be applied to a variety of different careers. So what I would urge listeners, and I'm sure many of them have done this in their own careers, educational background gives you tools and technical skills, and you can apply them to a variety of different careers, even if the training you received was for a specific career. But I use my law degree almost every day, even though I'm not actively practicing law. But I did for quite a while. I tried cases. I was a criminal defense attorney. I did divorce law. I did family law. I did guardianships. So it was fascinating. I loved it. But I did some environmental law for a while, and I actually now teach 1 semester a year at the University of Georgia School of Law, and I teach urban resilience and climate change.
Oh, that must be a lot of fun, actually.
Yeah, and I'm going to be at Vanderbilt Law School in a couple of weeks giving a guest lecture on urban resilience. So I still like to stay engaged. And what I like to teach my students, I've only done 1 semester, so I'm coming up on my next one in the spring, is the practical aspect of law, not just theoretical teaching in a classroom, but the work I did was very much hands-on. Here's policies you can implement at the local level to have an impact on urban resilience.
What did you study as an undergraduate?
I was a French major. I'm a big fan of a good liberal arts degree.
That is so interesting, because I was actually, as you were talking about how you could apply your academic background in a variety of ways, I was about to say, well, if you had a background in French literature, it might not be as easy. But
yeah.
I, too, believe in a liberal arts background just as a foundation for learning. And I don't think there should be any restrictions on undergraduates for just studying anything that would appear to be interesting. And later on, you can fashion it into a more applied career. Stephanie,
I agree.
We've reached the end of our program. I want to thank you for taking the time to be on the Business Hour and for shedding light on sustainability, environmental health, resilience, and just for being my guest.
It's been a delight. Thank you for having me.
You've been listening to the Business Hour here at America's Web Radio. We're on Fridays from 10 to 11 a.m. Eastern Time in the U.S. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you on the internet and the radio next week.
You're listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
Perhaps you are struggling to cope with the disease of addiction. If not, you probably know a family member or friend that needs help in battling the cravings and the personal and professional damage done by the effects of drugs or alcohol. Get a pen and paper and be ready to write down the following. These are the issues that the trained staff at the Atlanta Healing Center address and treat every day. Their doctors and counselors with over 40 years of practice in the field of addiction can treat the suffering individual in a thoughtful, compassionate, and experienced manner and guide him or her along the path to recovery. So call 770-696-9862 and speak to a knowledgeable staff member about how you or your loved one can be helped to enjoy a better and healthier life. More information is also available on the website at www.atlantahealingcenter.com.